Welcome back. I'm Brian Condi, and this is another podcast short. This podcast is going to focus on if you're going to do it, then do it. That's all about having confidence in yourself, especially in the workplace. When you're in the workplace, everybody's trying to get ahead. Some say that they're not, but you know what? Everybody wants to get ahead a little bit. And there's a game that we played at the workplace, and everybody knows the game. The corporate world, it's a big game. And to play it, you got to go for it. If you know it, if you can do it, then say something and go do it. Go for it. In my previous podcast short, we talked about adding value and looking for ways to add value to yourself, to your position, and ultimately the company that you work for. I've been in 9 different industries. And in those 9 different industries, they all have struggled with the same type of topics, challenges, trials. It's always a puzzle, and there's always pieces to be put in place in the corporate world. Let me give you an example. When I was working at the largest mozzarella cheese making company in the world, I was assigned to the largest cheese plant at the time. It's not anymore because it's been a minute. At the time, the largest mozzarella cheese making plant. I was assigned to be the main learning lead at that plant. That means it was just me, and it was my responsibility to work with the plant manager, the cheese making manager, the whey making manager, all these folks to help them with learning at this particular factory. What they were struggling with was what was called problem cheese. Now, problem cheese isn't what falls on the floor and can't be eaten. Okay, it's not dirty cheese. It's problem cheese. Well, why is it a problem? I'll get to that in a minute. What I was interested in was, did the cheese makers on the line of making cheese at their different stations, did they know what the individual upstream from them was doing and why, and the individual downstream from them was doing and why? Did they know that, and could they articulate that back to an individual or to a manager? I was also interested in knowing, did they know the why behind what it was that they did at their job? And what I had found out is that these folks were not allowed to know the why, or maybe it wasn't pushed upon them to know the why. They were instructed to always go to a supervisor when there was a problem, and that the supervisor solved the problem. So basically, these folks knew how to run the machines, but didn't know necessarily the why behind it. It's very interesting. When you're at a cheese factory, I'll just go through this quickly, and I'll probably miss some spots because I haven't done this in a while. But you have the truck that comes into the factory, and it's probably loaded with 20,000 pounds of milk. And that immediately gets pumped out of the truck and it goes to a silo, where from that silo, when it's ready, it goes into pasteurization, where it has to hit 160 degrees minimum to be pasteurized. Now, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty close. Once it's pasteurized, it goes into these large vats. And these vats probably hold, again, 20,000 pounds of milk. And these vats have big blades that come down into the center of the vat. And if the blade turns one way, it's cutting. If it's turning the other way, it's stirring. So when the milk comes in, it needs to be stirred. Okay. And while it's being stirred, there's a coagulant that's being placed into the milk. Now, coagulant, like a rennet, is what's going to solidify the milk. So when it is solid, the blade turns the other way and it cuts the milk. It cuts it into curd, and then you have whey. So now you have curd floating and you have whey. Now you have to drain those two out. So the curd is sucked through a pipe to go one direction, and the whey is sucked through another pipe to go to another part of the facility, factory. The curd then goes to what's called a dry mat conveyor, and it sits like a white mountain of snow on this dry mat conveyor, and it just sits there and it slowly moves until it gets to the right pH level. Now, the pH level is critical to hit before it moves on to be washed. And then it moves on to these big old washers, and it goes in and gets soaked in water, and it's just rotated and rotated and washed until it's moved on to the mixers. And the mixers takes that curd and brings it in it's big augers, and it just rotates through, and it stretches it, and it meshes it, stretches it, rotates it, and it pushes it on through to the person who is in charge of ingredients. And that cheese then comes in, and starch or coloring or salt or whatever the ingredients is dumped into that cheese. And again, huge augers of just stretching and meshing and mixing in these ingredients. And then it moves through these pipes to this big hopper, and it gets dumped into this hopper, where then another auger pushes it up through it looks like a flask. It looks like a horizontal flattened um, um, doohickey. What's it called? Um, Funnel. That's the word, funnel. And it comes out a foot wide, like 2 inches thick, and it goes down this conveyor belt that's as long as a football field. One long ribbon of cheese going down a conveyor belt that's as long as a football field, and there's this brine that's sprayed on top of the cheese, and it's chilled down to 16 degrees, and it's sprayed with brine all the way down until it gets to the end of the conveyor belt. And then there's a blade, and this blade rotates, and I know you just finished the sentence before I got there, but we'll all laugh together. It cuts the cheese. It cuts the cheese into big slabs, and then from there it goes on to be processed, either uh, however it's going to be processed. But the key is that cheese was made to a specific recipe. Now, when you eat a pizza, okay, Pizza Hut, Domino's, Papa John's, those folks have their own specific mozzarella recipe. And this cheese company has to make that cheese specifically to that recipe. And how did the pizza people know if it was made to their recipe? Because when that cheese is tested and melted down in the test kitchen, it needs to stretch, per Pizza Hut standards, a certain stretch, maybe 12 inches. It needs to blister a certain radius or circumference. It needs to color a certain brown blister. Now they have charts and they measure everything. And if it does not meet the specifications of Pizza Hut, then it's turned into problem cheese. And Pizza Hut can reject the whole batch. Doesn't mean the cheese doesn't taste good. Doesn't mean it doesn't melt. It just means it did not meet the specifications of Pizza Hut or Domino's or Papa John's or Little Caesars or whoever. They all have their own recipe. And if it doesn't meet or act to the specifications that it's supposed to, it's rejected. Problem cheese. Bum, bum, bum. So I was sitting at my desk one day and I saw the cheese manager. He just looked like banging his head against the wall. And he was writing on a whiteboard. So I walked over to him and I said, "Hey, what's happening?" And he says, "I have to go to a meeting with solution to the problem cheese." And I said, "Can I go to that meeting?" He says, "If you can come up with an answer to problem cheese in 10 minutes when the meeting starts, you can come to that meeting." I knew the answer that he was looking for. And I said to him, "Look, the problem cheese is because of this. Your cheesemakers don't know the why behind what they do, or the why behind what the person upstream from them does and the person downstream from them does. And they're always reliant on supervisors. By that time, it's too late. These folks need to know the why." I said, "I've got a program that I can design and execute that will teach every one of your cheesemakers the why behind what they do and the why behind what their colleagues do. And I promise it'll impact the problem cheese percentages." So I went to the meeting and I delivered. I delivered my idea. I was allotted the time to form the program and train all of the cheesemakers on their specific role, and then teach them the roles of those around them and the why they had to do what they do. And then at the end of the program, they had to meet with the master cheesemaker. And that master cheesemaker would take them through 2, maybe 3 hours of grueling cheese making questions to ensure that these folks knew the why. Again, it comes back around to adding value, finding ways to add value, but not only that. When you know you have a good idea, when you know you got something, go after it. Go tell somebody, go do it, and you're going to be just fine. That's what I'm talking about in this podcast short, is again, identifying where you can improve on efficiencies. And when you have an idea that you know is good, even if you don't know if it's good, but you feel it's good, go after it. Go talk about it. Go prove it. You'll be a rock star. This is episode 2 of Podcast Short.